As a reminder, today's session is being recorded. It will happen primarily in English, but as a reminder, that probably is not going to be everyone on the call's first language. So if you're unmuting and speaking, please do speak slowly. And if we ask you to repeat something, please don't be offended. It's just really helpful to have it said twice sometimes. We also have the chat function open for everyone. So if you'd rather not unmute and speak and you'd rather type, that's okay too. And we'll keep an eye on that throughout the session. So however you want to participate is fine. We also always say it's nice for folks to have their video cameras on so that we can see people like hearing the information and responding to it. But again, if you'd prefer not to, it is being recorded, any of that stuff, it's totally fine to switch your camera off. We'll know you're there and we can still interact with you, even if it's a blank triangle, rectangle, there we go. So this is one of sessions that happen each month. It's one of our think tank series. The platform is totally open to anyone from the network who has something they'd like to share, who's been working on a topic, or who wants to share any key outcomes of projects, themes, anything like that. So if you have anything you would like to host a think tank on, feel free to get in touch, to email us over, and it is wide open for anyone who wants to host. If at any point we get cut off and we all get kicked out of the Zoom call, don't panic. I'll just restart it in the same link and we'll pick up from wherever we left off. Most people in the room that we expect are going to be teaching artists, community artists. They are not professional Zoom users. So please bear with us if, slides get fuzzy or YouTube adverts pop up or something. And I think that is everything. I will also say, since you're all here, I assume you're all in our members platform that we have launched fairly recently. We are still in the process of ironing out those kind of issues and trying to populate that. So please do jump in, leave comments on things, get your folks signed up if you haven't already. It's really helpful for us to try and move everyone over there so we can have that space to upload recordings, comment, share files, whatever happens in the chat. So with all of that being said, I think that's the housekeeping for today. And unusually, I'm co-hosting today. Normally I pass over and stop talking now, but I'll pass over to my co-hosts for today to introduce themselves. So Lisa, do you want to say hello?
Hello, it's so lovely to see everybody, and from wherever you are joining today, I'm delighted to be here and share this space with you today. My name is Lisa Sinclair and I work for Scottish Ballet as Senior Dance Health Manager. So my role is to lead parts of our dance health programme at Scottish Ballet, which includes wellbeing programmes for people with neurological conditions, long COVID, and wellbeing support for health professionals. And my pronouns are she and her, and I was one of the, on behalf of Scottish Ballet, one of the lead partners involved in helping to shape and deliver Healing Arts Scotland. Thank you.
And Bryony.
Hi there, everyone. It's really lovely to join this today. My name is Bryony Murray, and I'm from a small charity in Scotland called Bazooka Arts. And we've been invited here today to share a bit about our organisation and also about our involvement in the recent Healing Arts Scotland Festival, which has been a huge success here. So I'm looking forward to sharing more with you about that. We've been running, I'm going to share a bit more once we get started. And my pronouns are she and her as well. I've got some nice images to share with you and just a bit of the background on what we've been working on over the last 25 years, actually, is how long we've been running, so quite a while. So I look forward to getting started.
Thank you. So I think it's always quite nice if we can all pop in the chat where we're joining from. So if you want to say hi in the chat, please do. Your name, where you are in the world, and a quick hello would be lovely. So for today's session, we are going to start with just a quick poll just to check who's in the room and kind of what the starting point is for level of expertise, knowledge already, so we don't cover stuff if you're, 10 out of 10 expert already. Then we're going to chat a bit about Healing Arts Scotland overall, what the relay involved, that was the part that ITAC ran, and hear from Bryony about participating in that. And recently, the reason for this session is the big report about what happened, what it meant, what happens next, just was launched last week. So we're going to go over some of those key findings, key outcomes, and what it means for our sector, specifically here in Scotland. So I'm going to start with a quick poll just to check where we are. So the first question is, how familiar are you with the field of arts in health? So we have options like I actively work in the arts and health space, and we're using health in the broadest possible term here, like well-being is included in this, all of that. You can say I have worked in the arts and health space, but it's not my primary situation. You're aware of it, you're not aware of it at all. And then the second question we have you ever participated in healing arts activations? So we're talking about Healing Arts Scotland. But as Lisa will share, the healing arts activation is something that happens in cities all over the world with the World Health Organization and Jameel Arts Lab. So we're talking about the Scottish one, but there have been, all over the world that's happened in different spaces. And then we have on a scale of 1 to 10, how much of an expert do you feel in arts and health practices? So 1 is like, I have no clue, I've never thought about it until right this second. And number 10 is like, you cannot teach me, I know. I am an expert. I could host my own think tank easily, no problem at all. So I'll give you maybe another couple of, maybe 30 seconds or something, just to get a feel for where we are. And I see answers coming in, so I'm assuming this poll is working and people have access. Okay. Okay, I'm going to end it in 5. Great. Okay, so I'm sharing the results now. Can you see? Great. Okay, so for the first question, we have most people here, about 58% have worked in the arts and health space, but it's not necessarily their primary focus. About 25% actively do work in the arts and health space, and others are kind of a smattering across the board. Most people have not taken part in healing arts activations, but actually 42% have. So that's really interesting. And I'll ask you to pop in the chat which ones, because I think that will be really helpful when Lisa talks us through some of that. And then on a scale of 1 to 10, about 33% are a 7, which is pretty high. And I sort of feel like a 7's really a 9, but you're modest. So that's very good to know that we have some helpful insights in the room with us. Okay. Thank you. I think that's a really solid grounding to get us going. So with that being said, Lisa, shall I hand over to you to talk us through what is Healing Arts Scotland? What are we talking about? What is the session?
Thank you so much. It's so lovely to see that there's such a variety of backgrounds, professional backgrounds, creative backgrounds as well. It's fantastic. So Healing Arts Scotland initially started as a nationwide week-long festival. I think we're safe to say we're calling it now, celebrating and advocating for the power of the arts to support health and well-being outcomes and to be truly transformational. And it was open to anyone working in the arts and health space really that wanted to get involved. It took place in August, the week commencing the 19th of August, and there were some key events that ran in Glasgow, in Edinburgh, in Orkney, in Aberdeen, and in Shetland, but really it was a national activation. And when we say activation, it really was designed to be a catalyst and to activate and mobilise further action through performances, think tank moments, panel discussions, Q&As, exhibitions, round tables, you name it. We really tried to cram as much into that week as we could because it felt like a key moment and opportunity for the people of Scotland and our international partners who are connected to this work to really come together to try to move forward this work and make it visible in places that we feel perhaps up to this point it hadn't had quite the level of visibility that we were hoping for. So rather than it being seen as a week-long festival, we would say that it has been the starting point for further discussion and momentum and action. So I would like to take you through a little bit of how it came about, a whistle-stop tour, and at the end of that, if there are any immediate thoughts that are coming through, don't feel you've got to keep them into yourself and wait till the end of the session today. I will stop and invite any kind of reflections or questions and feedback from you at that point as well. So just to give you a bit of background context, Healing Arts is a global campaign, and it was set up, it was initiated by the Jameel Arts Health Lab. It may be that some of you have knowledge of the Jameel Lab already, but they are doing really incredible work, really looking at how research, evidence, outreach and practice can really help to drive a systems level and policy shift, really advocating for and embedding the arts in policy discussions. And the Jameel Lab was established and formally constituted, formally set up very recently, but it informally came together during the pandemic, when Christopher Bailey, who's Arts and Health Lead at the WHO, met Stephen Stapleton, who is the head of an organisation called Culture Runners. And they then also engaged Niels Fiecchi from WHO Europe office and Professor Nisha Satyanani from New York University Steinhardt School. And they formed the core of the Jameel Arts Health Lab. And it is supported by the Jameel family. And one of their big priorities, their key priorities, is really trying to affect and support the discussions around policy and systems level change through the arts. And so we were introduced to that model, that global campaign, through a bit of chance, actually, a chance encounter. So myself and my colleague, our Director of Engagement and Organisational Culture at Scottish Ballet, Catherine Castay, we went over to University of Florida's convening around arts and health and social prescribing, and we were at a conference in 2022. Our good friend Dr. Jill Sonke and her colleagues were heading that up, and we were introduced to Christopher Bailey at that conference. And on the last day, we had an impromptu breakfast with him, and he then mentioned Healing Arts. And Catherine had said, well, that sounds amazing. That, we would love to have you brought it to Scotland before, and if not, is there an opportunity? Would you be interested in having it in Scotland? And through ongoing discussion, it suddenly became what would normally be a citywide activation. It had suddenly grown arms and legs to become a national event. And Chris had said to us, well, why don't you make it national? And we thought, well, why don't we? Let's do it. Let's see what we can mobilise in Scotland. And so from that, Healing Arts Scotland was born. And so from 2022 to 2024, Scottish Ballet, although we initiated this and we were the lead producers, we very quickly felt that there was an opportunity here for all of Scotland, that this was not something small that could just be kept within the confines of Glasgow or the central belt of Scotland, which is where we're based, that actually Scotland lends itself so well to this national moment and to this national movement because it has such a rich a tapestry of fantastic work happening in arts and health all across Scotland, and a very interesting and diverse geography, great roots in traditional arts right through to other art forms, which are all really well represented all across Scotland. And there's so much talent in existence in Scotland that we already knew of. We knew that there was so much amazing work happening in arts and health all across Scotland, from the very tip right up in Shetland down to the borders and everywhere in between. Scottish Ballet is part of that ecology, but in certainly no way the only organisation delivering this kind of work. And so from that moment, we continue to work with the Jameel Arts Health Lab, but we set up a range of information sessions. And we just asked people that we know through the sector, through our sector and through other sectors that we work in, our partners, our friends, our colleagues, spread the word. This is going to be happening, and we want as many people to get involved in this as possible. Whether you're an artist, practitioner working in this space, a health professional with an interest in the power and the potential of the arts to support well-being, or an academic, or a policymaker, a funder, everybody is welcome in this space, and we really want people to come together so that together we can really galvanise something quite unique, quite special. And so over a period of several months, there were some information sessions that took place. And from that, an advisory group was formed that had representation from over 40 organisations. And we met, it was maybe every two weeks initially, and towards the build-up of the Healing Arts Week, which took place last August, we then started to meet more frequently. From that advisory group, we then also broke out into smaller groups to look at specific things, such as planning conference moments, some of the national outreach work that ITAC led, for example, that you'll hear more about, an accessibility group, a research group, because we recognise actually this is probably going to be a key moment and a rare opportunity for all of these people to come together in this way and work in this unique way. So some of the aims of Healing Arts Scotland were, as we've mentioned before, to galvanise and create a buzz and a moment to really galvanise action and a momentum. But we really wanted to use it as a platform to showcase the amazing work happening all over Scotland, to really map out existing resources and assets, to shine a light on the incredible evidence that's already existing as well, but to also make gentle provocations about what we, working in arts and health in this space, would like to see happen next, what we think is needed, where we think is potential, where the opportunities and where the gaps are as well. And to bring everybody into that space, that shared space, to be able to celebrate, to debate and to have that conversation. And so over the period of many months, we then started to explore what themes could be, what were key priorities for Scotland. We were seeing, internationally, lots of really interesting work happen, and across, with our good friends and colleagues all across the UK. But what would make it unique to Scotland, and some of the key challenges and concerns within that Scottish context, being also mindful of that wider international context as well. And so our advisory group, which included artists and health professionals and senior colleagues from government, etc., collectively agreed that the following themes would be of real relevance to Scotland, but also show and demonstrate where we felt that the arts could have significant impact. And so that would be young people's mental health and well-being, loneliness and isolation, which actually we feel cuts across everything. It cuts across all of the themes. Dementia, which is also one of the WHO's key priorities as well. So there's a real link there. Social prescribing, and really thinking about the framework that is developing in Scotland at the moment and where the arts can really have an impact and feed into that, and thinking about creativity and there was some thought around this as well in confinement and what we mean by confinement. Now that can be within the justice system, but it can mean so many things as well. It can be meaning with individuals who feel quite isolated, perhaps within themselves, perhaps it's someone who is on dialysis, is a long-term patient in a hospital setting. It can mean so many things to many different people as well. And so through these themes, we were able to start to create and curate a programme that spoke to some of those themes in lots of different ways. And in addition to that, as we were doing that, we wanted to ensure that it wasn't only the organisations, because there was no funding. There was no funding for this. I have to note this. There was no designated funding. We relied on in-kind support, the generosity of spirit from most of the organisations that took part, and really thinking about what could they plan or contribute to this moment in time, perhaps with the resources that were already in place, perhaps the work that they were already committed to doing within their work plan. How could we help use this to really showcase and highlight that brilliant work that they would be doing? We did manage to raise some funds, but it is important to note that this was something that we just saw as an opportunity right now that would be a missed opportunity if we didn't act on it. So let's not wait for the funding. Let's start and see what we can attract and gather as we go along and we gather the support in different ways. So we then started to curate a programme together. But in addition to this, we did think, well, this is not okay, that we don't want it only to be accessible to organisations that perhaps already have infrastructure and support, because that's then missing the point. That's not creating an equitable space, and that's not really representing arts and health in Scotland and everyone that inhabits that space. So we worked closely with a range of partners to do a national call out, whereby we invited anybody working at any area of the community across arts and health to submit work that they would be doing at that point. So whether that was an embroidery group in Dumfries that supports older people, to people with postnatal depression doing singing in the Central Belt, or jewellery making up in the north to support people with loneliness and isolation. Absolutely anything at all that they wanted to share with us. And so through that call out and the geography, the spread of that was really significant as well. There were well over 100 different organisations and smaller groups through to larger groups that had their work represented and got that badged seal of approval from the Jameel Lab and WHO onto a visual map that still exists now as a repository of resources on a dedicated website. So it just meant that things were happening all over the country. Lots of things, small bespoke things, intimate events, and also bigger key moments and events that were happening as part of the curated programme too. So to tell you a little bit about the programme, we launched in Edinburgh during festival time, and that was festivals in Scotland over the summer are a key big thing. So many of you, I'm sure, already very well versed in that. And yes, Scotland does turn into a bit of a festival nation during the month of August, and particularly in Edinburgh. And so we very deliberately wanted to have the event kick off in Edinburgh during that point, so that we could align ourselves closely with the Edinburgh International Festival, who were a key partner. And it was great because it's such an international platform and a great celebration of arts and culture that we were able to use that to really shine a light on the work that was happening throughout the week all across Scotland. So in Edinburgh, we had a lovely opening celebration that launched the event outside Parliament. And that included about 250 to 300 community performers, which included people living with neurological conditions, health professionals, people from the Youth Music Initiative, the Youth Pipe Band of Scotland, and they came together to perform a piece of dance and to live music performed by the youth musicians. And it was a great celebratory moment, and for us really embodied that sense of community and the ability and potential of the arts to connect communities and bind us all. And true to form, it rained. It was Scottish summer, so of course the rain came down. And actually we had Arthur's Seat in the background and Parliament at the other side. It was very dramatic and very soggy and very lovely. And throughout the day in Edinburgh, we had it had felt like it had quite a conference feel in Edinburgh. It was quite policy focused. Some of the discussion was quite policy focused, but there was a lot of practice embedded throughout all of that as well. And that was really important, that no one element dominated the other, that actually it was very symbiotic. But it included international speakers, many of whom are members of the ITAC network, who either came over in person or joined us online to share their perspectives and their knowledge and their expertise for us all and with us all. And it was really, really exciting and really diverse, a real diverse range of voices and knowledge in the space as well. We then moved over to Glasgow, and Glasgow took quite a different feel. It happened in one venue at Tramway Theatre, which is where Scottish Ballet is based. And it was a real community focused day, and we really wanted to hand over the curation of that day very much to many grassroots organisations that work in and around the Glasgow area. And it felt like it brought a really lovely energy to the space, and such a breadth of art forms represented within that as well, all doing incredible work. We then also moved up to Aberdeen, and there was a team, a Healing Arts Scotland Aberdeen working group up there, led by City Moves and NHS Grampian as well, and the Culture Collective up there, who shaped their own Healing Arts group, Healing Arts Day in Aberdeen. And again, they made it their own. It was very unique to the context of Aberdeen, but still embracing those wider values of the wider Healing Arts National campaign. And it was a fantastic day, really beautiful work happening up there as well. And then the final day happened up in Orkney. Now, I went to all of them, so I was exhausted by the end because there was a lot of jumping around. But it was such an amazing day. So we went up to Orkney, and again, a working group up there, led by NHS Orkney and the University of Highlands and Islands, had created their own programme for the day, some of which took place in the university, some of which took place in the Balfour Hospital, including a lovely flash mob, an impromptu flash mob in the Balfour Hospital atrium, it was very beautiful, and a lovely backdrop of the Orkney dramatic scenery as well. And so throughout all of this as well, there were these beautiful curated moments, working groups in different cities that were helping to shape that programme. There was an online programme which rippled through the week and responded to each of those 5 themes that had been identified. And that was led by the Arts, Culture, Health and Wellbeing Scotland. And the reach of that was significant because it reached so many people that would otherwise perhaps not have been able to engage in person. And so that was really important too. And so for anyone that's interested in that, you can see the outputs and the assets that were created as part of that on the Healing Arts Scotland website. And if there's anything that isn't there that you would like to learn more about, please let us know, because we can get you access to any of those online elements of the programme too. In addition to that, there were some real discussions around policy and the positioning of the arts and culture within that space as well, within cross-portfolio discussions and where we want to see the arts positioned within health and social care, within social prescribing frameworks, within population health frameworks, etc. And 2 roundtable discussions happened, which we were able to attract and secure some senior input from the Cabinet Secretary for External Affairs, Constitution and Culture, and the Chief Medical Officer for Scotland as well, alongside other key government officials and civil servants, and importantly, people working within arts and culture, so that those voices were central to the discussion as well. And these were really great moments, and the result of which are that conversations are going on as well beyond healing arts, which we'll tell you a little bit about after. And I'm not going to talk too much longer, because there's so much more for you to hear from the others as well. But just to finish up on, which I think will segue into what we're hearing next as well, that it wasn't about the week in itself. The week was that huge moment and that celebration. However, in the build up to that, there was such a great network, a great network of lots of existing networks that really came together and expanded to really realise the vision for this work to happen. And so one of the results of that is that there is this incredible new network that has expanded and continues to expand, and such great strong partnerships and connections that have been made as a direct result. For example, with Madeleine and her colleagues at ITAC as well, you know, with such a rich collaboration and partnership that has come about as a result of that, and will continue beyond, way beyond August 2024. But in the build up, there was a significant amount of beautiful work happening all across the country as part of national outreach campaign. And Madeleine, I know that that's something that you're going to speak to us about as well. And I will talk a little bit more about the evaluation, the research and the impact at a later point as well. But before, Eric, you've brought something in here. What do you think made the invitation spread so well? I'm going to open that up properly. I can't see that. Do you have a ticket? Yes, I think that's an excellent question, Eric. Thank you. I think, what do you think made the invitation and wish to join spread so well? I would say that there was such great buy-in from this. I think it was difficult initially, or there were challenges initially, because we didn't fully know what it would be. We had a vision, but when people asked us, well, what is it and what is it going to be? Well, we don't know yet, because we're all in it together and we're all creating it. I think that was a draw. I think the fact that this was a journey that we were all embarking on together, and everyone had a stake in it, and we could co-design and co-shape this together into what we wanted it to be. So that was one thing. Relying on very much the existing networks on the ground to spread the word, that cascade effect, I think also generates and garnered a lot of buy-in. A lot of people on the ground who were doing that work, and various other networks that we hadn't ever encountered at Scottish Ballet. So spreading that word was really important, and having, you know, trying to create as much space for that to happen and to develop as possible. But I do very importantly think one of the big draws was the fact that this was part of a global healing arts campaign that had connection to the Jameel Arts Health Lab, that was led by Jameel Arts Health Lab, and also that connection to the WHO. That actually, you know, when you see that level, you know, that level of discussion and work happening, it's really encouraging. It's really encouraging to see that these discussions are happening all over the world, and they're being taken seriously as well. Yes, sorry, thank you, the World Health Organization. Thanks, Madeleine. And so I think all of those, I know certainly the Chief Medical Officer, for example, in Scotland, Sir Gregor Smith, and some of his colleagues at Scottish Government, it was seeing those kinds of connections and that support, and the fact that we were collaborating with them on this, that was a key connector for them. You know, to see that buy-in from that type of organisation really gives it a kudos and a credibility that I think Scottish Ballet approaching the networks on their own wouldn't have been able to do. So I think it was all of those things combined actually, and seeing that there's such amazing work already happening. It was a great moment in time. And also to say that developed communications networks, Stephen Stapleton, who is the leader of Culture Runners, that is his area of expertise, is around marketing communications, and he oversees all the comms and the creation of the assets for these, and he worked really closely with us all, with the partners on this, and we had a really, there was an excellent campaign around that, some beautiful resources created, some films, images, branding, really wonderful branding, a dedicated website for Healing Arts Scotland with a visual interactive map, and which is now a repository for a lot of these assets to sit as well. And also collaborations with, so we were allowed to use Small Town Boy by Bronski Beat as the theme tune of Healing Arts Scotland, for example. Those kinds of collaborations and buy-in from different artists was really key to that communication and that network. And then, of course, saying to people, share this out, share the word, spread the word, put this out on your socials, put this out in your newsletter, and help us to spread the word. So it was a big collective effort.
There's another thing I would say, Lisa, that is really helpful that often gets missed, and that is the amount of lead-in time you gave for the open call. Yes. So organisations here in Scotland, some are nationally funded, but most are not, and they have grant funding like a lot of other organisations. And so those smaller organisations need a lot longer to try and mobilise staff and funding and input and all that kind of thing. And so having the amount of time that you gave that open call before anything had to begin was a huge factor in allowing a lot of smaller groups to participate. And I think that was a huge move that helped that spread.
Yes, thank you. That's a great point, Madeleine. Yeah, it's been very important. It's important.
So speaking of the run-in activities then, I will give a quick overview of the relay activity and some of the work that ITAC did in collaboration to make Healing Arts Scotland happen. I realised I didn't actually share, my name is Madeleine McGirk Rutherford, and my pronouns are she, her at the beginning, so I was busy with the poll. I'm the director of ITAC, and we were really close partners in delivering Healing Arts Scotland right from the beginning, which is a huge point of pride now, seeing how it's all turned out and the way it grew and all that good stuff. So I'm going to share with you one of the key ways that ITAC contributed to Healing Arts Scotland. So hopefully I'm screen sharing and it's all loading for you now, but just someone interrupt me if it doesn't appear in a wee minute. Great. So when I first had a coffee with Catherine and Lisa from Scottish Ballet to hear about what was happening with Healing Arts Scotland, we had been together at a WHO meeting and we had in Denmark, I think, and we had a chat about what the Scottish context was and what that meant internationally and how that all interconnected. I'm personally Scottish and based in Scotland, but obviously ITAC is international, so it's really rare that I undertake work here or that that's something that I do. So this was also kind of a little privilege to be working at home in contexts that I recognise. And you shared with me that Healing Arts Scotland was going to be taking place and that you didn't really know what it was going to be yet, but we were, in it to figure out together, would ITAC like to contribute? What did we see as being something that would be helpful or needed? And so for me, and I think quite a lot of colleagues, one thing that I feel quite strongly is often whenever you hear that policy discussions are going to happen or that kind of level of discussion is on the cards, usually the voices of teaching artists and community artists are not included in that. And historically, that's unfortunately been the case. And so one of the key priorities for us was how do we make sure that when we get to that stage, that the teaching artists are front and centre and that it isn't people talking as if they've just invented arts and health, but it's like all the people who've been doing it for a really long time in communities are the experts advising on what that needs to look like and how that happens and pointing out the gaps and all those things, because often those two things don't connect. And thankfully, that was a similar goal that I know Scottish Ballet held too. So we kind of bonded over that and came up with the idea of a national relay. So this was in the lead up to Healing Arts Scotland. So Healing Arts happened in August, for the month of August last year. And so in the 6 months leading up to that, we ran a relay, an artistic relay throughout the country. So I reached out to all of our colleagues that I knew here in Scotland and asked them to do the same. ITAC 3, so our third conference was in Edinburgh. So there is quite a group here that kind of knows about ITAC or is linked up to us in some way. And I said, are you doing work in arts and health already? Do you want to come together and kind of do something? We can connect up. And so in about the 6 months leading up to the relay, we got together and we had meetings every couple of weeks to talk about what could it be, what could it look like, how might it work, how could it add something rather than be like another thing everyone has to do. And so we came up with this concept that each group would receive a stimuli based on one of the 5 themes of Healing Arts Scotland. And Lisa mentioned them already, but as an example, dementia, creativity and confinement were a couple of those. So we thought we'd have one group per month working in response to the stimuli in whatever art form and way they practice. And then at the end of the month, whatever they created would get passed to another group. And they'd react to that and pass something to another group. So they were already going to be making art. They were already going to be doing that work. But this was just a light touch way for us all to recognise that through line of connection and have it move about the country to become something at the end. So we figured we'd have about one group a month, 6 months, we'd have 6 groups. But then, of course, it got much bigger than we thought, which was great. And we ended up having 5 strands of activity over those months. And some months were divided, some became bubbles. There's a big Dance for Parkinson's network in Scotland. And so one month became like a bubble. And so there were multiple dance groups responding to each other and then passing to another, you know. And in the end, we had, let me just share the numbers properly. Oh, we'll skip the video because it's my voice and I'm already talking. But here we go. We had 450 participants in the end, which was made up of about 40 community groups and overwhelmingly positive response. So because it was a co-created project, we had those meetings all together in the run-up. It wasn't prescriptive for me about what it needs to look like or be, but there was the agreement that something would be passed. It was totally up to the groups how things were passed, if it was like a Zoom link. Some things, obviously, if you are working in confinement settings, you can't show faces or names, so it's maybe going to be sound or hands or something. And in that case, obviously, the groups can't meet up to pass things over, but if the groups wanted to, they could. And so it was all quite loosely done in terms of what made sense, but because we'd all collectively agreed the format, once it was off and running, it was really off and running, and it was kind of a joy to watch happen. We had some great feedback about the format overall. As Lisa said, one of the big things that tends to happen here, because there are quite a lot of big rural spaces in Scotland, if you are working in a community centre way up in the Highlands, even if you're both doing dance projects, you are very, very unlikely to know and meet someone doing a dance project down in the borders. It's not a massive country, but for some reason, things are still kind of disparate and disconnected. And so this was our way of starting to nod at the beginnings of a connected collective tapestry of work. So when it was all finished, we had a couple of months to kind of gather things up before August. And then we had an exhibition of all the work in Parliament in August, which is when the festival's on, but it's also when we have our Festival of Politics in the Parliament. And we had it on at the National Gallery here as well. So the population of Edinburgh doubles in August. It is huge. And so there's tons of people coming and going in those spaces at that time. And the groups were able to come, see their work in those spaces, have it recognised as legitimate, important artwork to do with health, and to have it in the spaces where the policy discussions are happening. And a lot of the colleagues and participants were able to come, be on panels, speak, be part of those discussions, which was also kind of the point of the whole entire thing. So this is summarised in the report, which Lisa will talk more about in a moment. But with us today is Bryony, who led one of the relay groups in the participation. So I think it's probably better to hear from Bryony about what that experience was and what the groups took away from that. So I will hand over to you, Bryony.
Thanks, Madeleine. Thanks, Madeleine. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so I was just going to share a little bit of the background into Bazooka Arts and then lead into our involvement in the relay, which was just such a brilliant experience. I thought it would be helpful just to give a little bit of background to us. So I'm sure it will resonate with a lot of you that are here joining us today. So I co-founded Bazooka Arts in 2001 with my colleague Zoe Brooke. And there's just the two of us that run the organisation. It's a tiny charity, And we'd been working together previously for 4 years for a really large training for work organisation, and we were involved. The company worked in areas of multiple deprivation around Glasgow, carrying out environmental improvement work and building and developing sort of landscaping. And it was our job there really to engage with the community where urban regeneration work was happening. And that led us to working in really some of the most deprived areas of Glasgow. Some of them are quite well known for having sort of quite high rates of sort of drugs and violence and gangs. And so that's kind of where we were working. And over the time we were working there, we noticed that the methods that we were using just were incredible, really, in engaging and creating sort of positive change and connecting young people who were on the verge of exclusion from school. They were connecting in, and it was a spark from that work that led us really to look at what it was we were doing. So I'm a visual artist and designer, and my colleague Zoe's a drama practitioner and drama therapist, and it was just our combined way of working that we've honed really over the last 20 years, which we realised actually it had something which really empowered people to make sort of positive changes in their own life and to build their health and their well-being, and also to support the health and the well-being of their community as well. So I'm just sharing, these are just some of the images of some of the people we've been working with to give a little bit of a flavour of the sort of things we've been doing. So we work right across the arts. We deliver drama-based projects and theatre, and we work with film and visual art. And although it's only the two of us that are running the charity, we've got a team of freelance artists that work within the arts and health context that work with us regularly as well. And we work with people really of all ages and abilities. Ultimately, we work with people who are isolated or facing social isolation, whether that's due to poverty or disability or learning support needs. It could be due to addictions, all kinds of things. Sometimes we work with professional people who have had a crisis in their life and have ended up out of employment, and things have changed in their life. So these images that you can see now on the screen just now are in an acute care ward in Glasgow's Children's Hospital, where we worked with children who were really having to spend quite a long time away from home, and they now have artwork in the hospital. And some of these photos that you see now are actually from adults who we were working with a daycare centre which was being closed in Scotland, and we were supporting really the transition of the closure of a daycare centre. That's a centre really for adults with sort of communication support needs and learning support needs, and these centres were being closed. So we worked with these groups over that transition really to become part of the community, and they founded their own theatre company as a result, which has been amazing. So yeah, we can just click through. These are just some of our recent workshops, and as you can see, we work with children and adults. So this slide is leading us on to the Healing Arts Scotland Festival, and we were part of the relay, which Madeleine's described, and it was honestly just such an amazing process. We linked in with Glasgow Print Studio, which is a professional printmaking studio in Glasgow, and we were handed visual arts work from another Glasgow-based organisation, which we responded to. And the people in the photos that you can see are participants of my projects who are all unpaid carers, but they also generally have other things going on in their lives as well. Some of them have spent time in hospital due to their mental health, and so this project really was a really important space for them. and this is some of the artwork that they produced. So we created screen prints, and all of these screen prints were in response to the artwork that we'd received from the creative baton that was handed to us. And these slides are of the artwork being exhibited. So it was really quite an incredible experience for the participants that took part, who really have generally, not many sort of platforms to, have their voices heard and to be visible. This is about to start a little film, actually, Madeleine, so it might sort of start playing in a sec. I'm not sure.
I think for time we may skip ahead, because I am conscious that we need to
wrap up.
Time for questions.
Okay, so yeah, so we've just kind of whizzed through some of the photos, and it, honestly, I can't describe what an incredible process it was to be part of the relay. And it was a great connector, not only for the participants, but for us as an arts organisation. We quite often find that we're working in isolation as well. So the relay and the festival was a great connector, not only for our participants, but for us as an organisation working with arts and health. And it was really a great inspiration. And and we really hope that it is going to lead to more of this. So yeah, anyway, I'll leave it at that, and hopefully we can welcome any questions.
Thank you. So as always, we have overrun. So I think rather than talking you through the report, we'll share the report in the chat and open up for any questions. So is anyone sitting with something specific, or a question, a thought you're having? Feel free to unmute and share.
I have a question. It's lovely to hear of the community excitement and the energy in the organizations that were participating, but there also seems to be a connection toward possible policy impact. How did that happen? So often we have activities that everyone involved has a great experience, and it doesn't have any impact beyond that on policy. What seemed to make the difference here?
I can speak to that a little. Lisa, maybe you want to as well.
Yeah.
I think having an explicit intention for it from the outset was really important, because it meant whatever we did, that wasn't a focus that was lost. But then there was also a really intentional thing about what kind of impact, or what kind of voices we want to be having the impact on the policy. So it was kind of all of that. I also think it's helpful that Scotland is a small country, and so it is easier to get some of that momentum going. But having the buy-in from the Chief Medical Officer, from the Cabinet Secretaries, and having some of those roundtable discussions during the week, during the momentum of it, like at its height, I think was really important. And we launched the report last week of the week before in Parliament at a reception with members of Scottish Parliament, and launched a cross-party group for healing arts. So it will be an ongoing discussion now with different, groups from different parties in an ongoing way.
Were you pushing for specific policy targets, or did your more influential people actually think up out of their own inspiration?
I'll jump in here if that's okay, Madeleine. So I think it actually has come, it's been quite organic, and I think there's been a bit of, it's been quite aligned. I think timing has been of the essence here, because in Scotland we're working towards a population health framework, but also Scottish social prescribing frameworks are emerging. It is emerging in Scotland, and there's been some work, there is some work happening around that. The timing was really key for us in Scotland, and so we were able to really use that as an opportunity and use this to leverage that. The influence of having the Jameel Arts Health Lab for this to have been part of the global campaign was also a key driver in that, because one of their key focuses is policy development and policy shift. It's one of the overarching aims of the lab. It then really helped to support us to really have the confidence to move forward in that space, like you said, Madeleine, quite explicitly. And I think that a lot of the key stakeholders who were involved, organisations who are working in this space, also have that shared ambition. So like the Arts, Culture, Health and Wellbeing Scotland Network, that's part of their remit to help push for culture to be more present and visible within different cross-portfolio policies as well. So I think that combined force came at just the right time to help leverage that. And those roundtables were key to that. The roundtable discussions really helped to support that. And those conversations are ongoing now as well, which is really important, that it isn't just something that happened, but actually there's accountabilities now and recommendations that have been put into that report.
Can you also say, just very briefly, so we have time for another question as well, but something, the Public Health Scotland said something last week, that it's the arts is now going to be in their framework for the first time going forward, right? Can you say something about that and what happened?
Yes, certainly. So Public Health Scotland, up until this point within their strategy, hadn't ever really referenced the arts and culture as a health behaviour, as something that is embedded as a public health, to support public health outcomes. And so the culture around that is now shifting, and Public Health Scotland actually hosted an event for 100 of their staff at Healing Arts Scotland in Glasgow, because they really got on board with this. And so we're now, the Healing Arts Scotland Leadership Group, which is formed as a legacy of this, is having ongoing discussion with Public Health Scotland, and they are looking to, they're discussing how they can review and refresh their strategies moving forward to include and embed the arts and culture within that, which is huge. It's a huge step forward.
Yeah, she described it as an epiphany last week and my jaw just about dropped. So that's a phenomenal legacy. Yeah. Any other questions or things that people have? Okay, we have something in the chat. Lisa, you are more likely to have seen this than me. Are you aware of?
I haven't, but I thank you for sharing. I think it'd be really great to see that. And actually that use of language, creative health, is really interesting as well. It's something that we've been speaking about quite a lot. And thank you for sharing that, Emma. Really be great to explore that.
Yeah, I mean, they've just got a big pot of funding as well, but it's so it's across the 10 Manchester combined authorities, so it's quite a big area. And I was partly involved in it, but they've been doing some really interesting stuff around social prescribing, around competencies for teaching artists as well. There was a group looking at teaching artists who are going to be working with the global majority and exploring competencies around doing that effectively for teaching artists of colour generally. And there's quite a lot of this year, and they're looking at different things. I'm part of the Children and Young People's working group, and there's different areas of focus, but we've been doing stuff for, I can't remember, like maybe a year or two, but we got this funding for it to carry on now for a bit longer. So there's some really, strategic thinking there. So I think, it might be a bit, some of the things like a shortcut, you know what I mean, when you're trying to develop.
It would be good to speak to you. I think we'd probably all welcome that, Emma. That would be, and learn more about that work. Sounds very, very innovative and exciting.
And if not, I can introduce you to the person who's leading you on it as well. So yeah,
thank you so much.
So I'm conscious that we are at time. As always, it kind of runs away from us. I'm happy to stay on the call an extra 5 minutes or so if anyone does have any really specific questions or things they want to run by us. But just in case, because I know everyone jumps off for other stuff, or Neil, I can't even imagine what time it is for you right now. So anyone who needs to jump off of a call, please feel free. Thank you for joining. The recording is going to go up as always in the next couple of weeks on ITAC's YouTube. So if someone wasn't here that you think would enjoy it, you'll be welcome to share that too. And don't forget to share our members platform with people as well, so that they can sign up, be part, receive invitations to these things in the future. So massive thank you to Lisa and Bryony for sharing with us all about that work. I think there will be a lot more to come, I hope. ITAC sits on that legacy group that Lisa was talking about, so we'll remain engaged and keep you all updated too. If there's a healing arts happening in your area and you want to think about a relay, let me know, because this one happened in Scotland, the next one doesn't need to. And for the meantime, thank you so much for taking the time to join and to be part of the discussion. So thank you, everyone. I'll leave the call open, but if you need to sign off, thanks for coming, and I'll see you soon.
I'm just thinking there's so much stuff happening, certainly in the Greater Manchester area, that there might be something there around making that sort of international connections. I don't know what yet, but yeah, because I mean, and there's just quite innovative. It's the first place to have a health strategy, I think, at a local authority like that on that scale. Just creative health, so that's something. I know London are looking at developing one as well, because they had the national centre, but they weren't, that was kind of standalone. I think they're looking at how they can embed it into kind of the authorities, combined authorities. So yeah, I think just maybe at some point it'd be really interesting to hear about how it works with the World Health Organization and that sort of, that's sort of the big picture, the international picture, which I'm very much less clear on. Whereas like at a more sort of regional level, I'm kind of have a lot more depth there. So it'd be, maybe Lisa, we could have a conversation at some point.
Would value that very much. Thanks, Emma. I don't know, should I put my email address in the chat? Is that the easiest thing to do?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, I'll do that now.
Emma, are people using those teaching artist competencies that are in that report? Is it like a working tool, or
so
more
it was
conceptual?
What we did was we started looking at what we thought some of them were, and then I wasn't one of the training partners because there were better people suited. So they came up with a set of competencies, and they were working with a group. It's called the Myriad Group, and they were working with a group of artists, and it was very much about testing them and developing. I'll find the link and I'll put it in the chat. And I know it's something that we're quite interested in terms of. So the project I'm doing at the minute, which is working with using poetry in secondary schools with poets and teachers working alongside each other, we developed a training package that used a model that Edge Hill University and Salford University developed called Arts for the Blues, which is quite a well-established model that's been going for about 10 years. And they modified it for us because it's a clinical model that has only been used largely with adults. So we worked with them, and they've sort of modified it to look at it, whether it can be. So we hope it'll still have the impact, but it can be delivered by artists and teachers and people who aren't, clinical practitioners. So we're in the middle of testing that. So they had training for that, trauma-informed training, and then we had this mini little lovely residential where they. We did other work with them around creative interventions and loads of stuff. So I think it is that sense of trying to skill up the practitioners so that they are not just, they're very willing, but sometimes, you're talking about people's mental health, and things like that. People are just thrown into situations. And alongside that, we've built in supervision from Edge Hill University at different points for the artist, because if you're a counsellor, you get supervision, when you're sort of dealing with artists are in there doing all sorts of things, and those systems, that support net systems aren't in place. So it's kind of stuff I'm trying to look at the minute is around that skill set. What are the things that you can feel confident that you're going to go in and do more good, and you're going to do no harm kind of thing. And the young people, teaching artists can go, sort of know where to start thinking about what sort of skills or what do they want in their toolkit in order to be able to do that effectively. And they're also doing that at a scale across Greater Manchester, or we're starting to develop that work in Greater Manchester. Yeah, I'm just a little part of the thing in Greater Manchester, you know what I mean? I just been involved since the beginning.
And one
Um,
of the benefits, if that kind of set of competencies can spread, is a common vocabulary, which we really don't have at this point.
yeah.
Mhm.
I think that's one of the key points that came up within our discussions around recommendations, moving future actions. How do we benchmark and start to create a framework and structure and recognise structure for artists working across this? There's so many contributions and such a level of skill and expertise that develops over many years. But yeah, there isn't. Unlike, I guess a graded nurse, there's a scale, isn't there? There's
Yeah,
a scale, and we
exactly that.
know that exists, that benchmark. We know what level of skill that involves. Yeah, to have something similar, I think a benchmarking would be excellent. There was
And
a
I
bit of
think that sense
international
of, sorry.
benchmarking in. Sorry, there was an international benchmarking study that started a few years back in dance health. Now, I don't know where that, we weren't actually, we weren't connected really. I think we completed a survey, but I'm not sure where it went, but it feels like there's more of that needs to happen as well.
I think because there's a big thing, I mean, because I'm involved, been doing some work around social prescribing, which is lovely, and working around it being, we've developing work for social prescribing for young people, which is not something that really happens. Not us, I mean, in Greater Manchester, loads of people. And often it ends up being sport, you know what I mean? So I was trying to do my bit for the art, you know what I mean? It's like, how do we balance that out? But there could be a lot of issues around that because we had a lovely program where young people commissioned activity for their peers, and it was about being community-based and community organizations, and they're doing amazing stuff. They're in the community, but at the same time, if there's meant to be an element around exploring well-being or dealing with, are they equipped to do that? Do you know what I mean? And they can be terribly willing and really, but it feels like there needs to be another level of, if we're going to get into social prescribing, there needs to be a bit more rigor, and B, it has to not be seen a way of sorting out health on the cheap at the expense of what is already a hideously underfunded sector or grassroots groups. You know what I mean? That is not what it's got to be. So it's how well, really pushing for social prescribing, you sort of are building the framework around it so that it's done well and people are recompensed and trained, and like you say, there's a sense of progression for the people involved in it without having to become an art therapist, which obviously takes about 5 years, and it might not be what you want to do.
It's safeguarding essentially as well, isn't it? Essentially, not only for participants but for the staff.
Yeah, that support thing. There's artists. I mean, we've talked somewhere that dealing with some very challenging situations, whatever, and they're trying their best, but is it their job? You know what I mean? It's like they're not trained for that. That isn't what the expectation was, but somehow they're trying to manage that, because especially in Britain, because we've got such a huge issue around access to mental health stuff. So there's a thing in Manchester that it's a night. I mean, I know they're trying to think, but it's called being well while you're waiting. So while you're on a hideous bloody list, waiting 2 years before you can get to see a mental health thing, it's like they're trying to find sort of other interventions, but often these people that certainly around the mental health of young people, they're already at quite an acute point. You know what I mean? They're not just having a bit of a bad day. We've got young people in crisis who are being given, I suppose, support that is probably doesn't meet their needs where they're at. So I think there's a lot of work to do around that in terms of the appropriateness of social prescribing and who it's for and at what level in terms of where people are on that kind of on a continuum of sort of crisis, if that makes sense.
I am going to chip in here with a quick time check.
Sorry,
No, I feel like there's possibly, Emma, another session to be had soon. If you wanted to take it on, you'd be very welcome around something to do with this, but also probably some follow-up calls amongst ourselves. Before I close out this call though, is there any last remaining stuff that anyone wanted to flag and just hasn't had that moment yet? Okay, cool. Well, in that case, I think we all have each other's emails. If not, I think we're all in the members platform and can DM each other there if we need to. If anyone needs anything that they don't have, just email me and I'll sort you out. But hopefully that, I think, brings us to a close for today. And a massive thank you again for the engagement, for the questions, and for being in touch. So thank you all. I'm going to leave the chat open just for another 30 seconds in case you want to save it before I end the call. But thank you very, very much, and I will see you all.